Welcome to the Touch MBA Admissions Podcast, where we discuss all things related to MBA admissions and how to get into your number one school. If you want to know more about this program, check out our website at touchmba.com. Welcome everyone to the Touch MBA podcast. So this is Darren, your host, and it is my pleasure to introduce our next guest, Mr. Nick Soriano, who is the Director of MBA Marketing and Admissions for the Nanyang MBA. And back when I used to work for SMU, I'd always see Nick out on the road recruiting. And Nick, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Darren, and hello to everyone.
Nick, could you just tell us a little bit about your background, about how long you've been with NTU and what you were doing before that?
Yeah, I joined NTU something like 4 years ago to head up the Director of MBA Marketing and Admissions for the Nanyang MBA. At the time, they were looking for people who are outside of the industry to provide a new direction to the way we are recruiting people, at the same time trying to improve the quality of the participants. Before that, I had probably, I can say, around more than 15 years of management experience. The longest probably is I joined a giant oil company, like people would know it's Shell. And also after my MBA, I joined a few more industries like in supply chain management. I'm also was an entrepreneur for some time, doing my own business, consulting and other works that I did during that time, and also joined an NGO before joining the education industry, which is Nanyang.
So Nick has a really diverse work background to draw from as he recruits candidates from all over the world. So Nick, the first question I have for you is, what makes the Nanyang MBA unique? There's so many MBA programs popping up in Asia and all around the world. So what makes the Nanyang MBA unique?
I think I would like to start with saying that most of the MBA programs are similar in terms of addressing the typical management courses and things like that. So it's a lot of them are very much similar in terms of the courses, the electives. What differentiates from one to the other is quite difficult to ascertain. This is why Nanyang is trying to also do some sort of differentiation. When we introduce the new 12 months curriculum for 2013, we're saying we're offering you a different package, and we are also trying to address the needs, the present and future needs of industry with regards to MBA hires. So Nanyang's uniqueness will be more on its curriculum, because we have focused on three different aspects of what the industry needs are. These are leadership across cultures, Asia, a strong, deeper knowledge of Asia, and relevance to industry, which is more relevant to industry rather than just saying we're teaching you guys management programs, but basically addressing what the industry needs. So the program is more relevant to what the industries are looking for in terms of MBA hires. In terms of people, I think diversity is also one of the key things that Nanyang always espouses. We tend to be more international in our students' composition, basically coming from around 22 countries. Of course, it's not as diverse as the other big schools, but we have a small program of 80 to 100 full-time students. So we can be categorized also as a small program compared to the bigger programs.
Nanyang recently changed its curriculum, like you said, so now it's a 12-month program, correct?
Yes, 12 months. But like I said, 12 months is full-time, right? But if you are coming from a sponsorship from a company and you require more than 12 months, we do have a customized program for people who are sponsored by their companies to do a 24 months program.
Got it. And I mean, you mentioned these three traits that you wanted the Nanyang MBA curriculum to be relevant to today's world, to reflect the rise of Asia, and to also reflect your school's a belief in corporate governance and sustainability. How did you come to these three focuses for the program?
The purpose is basically derived from understanding the changes in the market environment where our clients or the eventual employers of MBAs are operating. So we recognize that the market has become more volatile than ever. It's very, very difficult to navigate. So there's this difficulty in navigating the current markets. And of course, we see a lot more companies, especially multinationals or even Asian multinationals, are playing a lot more emphasis on Asia as the market of growth aspirations. So there's a lot of these things happening. And we also see a lot of companies trying to do more on their corporate social responsibility, or CSR as most people call it now. So, and these are things that drove us to really work on something that will address this market forces in terms of delivering the outstanding MBA hire that typical company will employ to bring their organizations to the next level.
And are there any new exciting developments with the program?
Definitely. Like I said, a lot of our people are quite competent in the past during the 16 months program. But what we're saying now, we're developing more or having more emphasis will be on leadership. This leadership module, which is very unique across the world, I would say, is because it is anchored on the philosophy of cultural intelligence, which Nanyang Business School is also advocating. We have a very strong team on this one. We even have the first center of cultural intelligence established in the world. So we're saying this leadership across cultures, which is what the employers are also looking forward to have for an MBA hire, is now being addressed and being emphasized at Nanyang. This is across 2 trimesters. It's a structured program across 2 trimesters that will eventually lead you to become a leader if you're not yet a leader, or become a better leader if you're already a leader. So this means being able to lead talents across cultures, which definitely is a big plus, because mobility of MBA hires is now a norm rather than a fixture.
So when you, just to make it clear, when you say 2 trimesters, 1 trimester is how many months?
A trimester is actually 4 months. So 2 trimesters will be across 8 months. So 2/3 of your time you'll be spending on leadership modules.
Amazing. So that's 8 months of leadership modules. That's a lot.
Yep.
Why should candidates get their MBAs in Singapore of all places?
Singapore is in a unique strategic location in Asia. If you're coming from the West, it makes sense, because Singapore is where the East meets the West kind of environment. It's a very soft landing point for somebody who will be going to Asia for first time, and also because Singapore is a real global environment to work for. There's more foreigners, more nationalities represented in Singapore. There are something like 6,000 multinationals headquartered here that are operating in Asia. So it's a logical choice if you are somebody from the West coming to Asia. But if you're an Asian, also it is of good advantage, because Singapore, as I mentioned, is an East-West environment. So if you're an Asian trying to do your MBA in Singapore, it strengthens your positioning as far as Asia is concerned, and at the same time addresses your global aspirations, because, like I said, there are something like 6,000 multinationals headquartered in Singapore, and as an Asian doing your MBA in Singapore, it exposes you to more opportunities. And in Singapore, it's quite unique in the sense that it's not just China that you will be learning. You will also be learning about India, which is Singapore, as you know, part of our population are from India. With that, there's also an emphasis on India. The India connection of Singapore is also as strong as that of China. So you're covering the two Asian powerhouses, and then you add the Southeast Asia component of that one, and that strengthens the case for a real Asian expertise or knowledge. And then, of course, Australia on the side, and towards the north will be the Northeast Asian countries like Korea, Japan, and Taiwan. So it's really, really the center of Asian operations. And again, if you're a female, Singapore, as you know, is one of the most, if not the safest location in the world. So you don't have to worry. Singapore is also very clean and environmental friendly. So it's a very nice place with a very convenient place. And probably, as most rankings will say, Singapore is one of the locations to be in terms of work-life conditions are.
Yeah, I'm personally biased because I also lived in Singapore for 6 years, but I've lived in China, I've lived in Taiwan, I've lived in Vietnam, and I could definitely say that my time in Singapore was, I met the most different types of people from all over the world, and that was one of the best parts of living there. It did get quite expensive towards the end, but it was truly a cosmopolitan city. Actually, Nick, if we could just go back to leadership, the new leadership module that we were discussing. I just find it really interesting that Nanyang is emphasizing this CQ, as you told me earlier, this cultural awareness and intelligence. Can you describe in a little more detail like how exactly that module works over 2 trimesters and like what sort of situations you put your students in?
Okay, the leadership module, which will be done across 2 trimesters, like I said, is a structured module where people will be attending seminars and lectures. We will be using case studies as well. As you know, Nanyang is very much a case study kind of business school. We do a lot of case studies. So this case study will focus more on the cultural aspects, because we are not saying just cultural awareness, but basically the intelligence behind it. So there is some knowledge or theory behind the culture of how and why a particular culture operates, or how to manage this kind of people, because every culture is unique in its own way. So in addition to all these seminars, workshops, and case studies, and also projects, you will be subjected to talks by eminent people who are sort of experts in this particular field of study or management practice. So that is going to be the key things about this. And if you're going to do also a business study mission, there is always this cultural component as well, the cultural intelligence component that will be built into the program. So there's a lot of emphasis on both the theory and as well as application in terms of case studies. And if you attend the business study mission, there's this actual application also of using the knowledge that you will learn from these 2 modules.
I think that's fantastic. I really like that new focus. I think that's very unique. And so my last question on the program is, MBA candidates are often asked, what 3 words would your friends use to describe you? So what 3 words would Nanyang MBA students and alumni use to describe the program?
The program or themselves?
I'd say the program. And then themselves.
Okay. Because those are 2 different things. I think from the past, not talking about the new curriculum, which is going to be challenging, Nanyang graduates or students would always characterize the Nanyang MBA experience as holistic, because it's a lot of things that they will learn from many basic tenets. So it's very much holistic in terms of experience, in terms of the entire academic experience. They will say is challenging. I think one of the things that Nanyang is known in the market, as well as what our alumni or students are saying, is that the program is very much challenging, that it requires people to really work hard. you really have to do more case studies than compared to other schools. That's why the fight. It's a constant fight between work, or in academia we say study, and life, right? So that's why it's always a constant struggle between having more fun or having more work. Nanyang. So it's a very challenging program. It's always a common denominator among our students and alumni. The other word that they would say is, I think, the interactivity, the interaction between the students and faculty or lecturers. I think it's great in Nanyang, because one of the key things that our professors or lecturers are doing is not to allow anybody just to sit in. That's why the sessions, the class within the program is very much interactive, because there will not be an instance where you as an MBA student or participant will not be able to contribute, because the difference between a typical MBA classroom experience and that of any other program is probably getting contributions from the class. So it's a very, very interactive discussion that will go on. There will be, of course, plenty of debates, especially since there are a diverse group of people discussing particular cases, so they come from different perspectives. So you can imagine a lot of debates, arguments coming into the class. So interaction is something that they would describe the program. And of course, post-MBA, I think they would most likely describe the program as very much rewarding, because I think most of the time they will be talking about being able to apply the knowledge, the experience, the training they have undergone while at the Nanyang MBA into their respective boards, and it has helped them to become more or less successful in their careers.
Can you walk us through the life of an application in your office from an operational standpoint? So what happens between the time an applicant submits his or her application to the time he or she hears from MBS?
The admission process is a 3-step process that we have. Of course, the first one, after you have submitted your application, it will undergo the first stage, which is basically the assessment. This is basically a paper assessment where the admissions committee will review your application form, your supporting documents, and other things about you. So it's mainly more of a paper assessment that we do on the first stage. And then after the assessment stage, you will proceed to an interview stage. But having said that, the shortlisting comes in before you proceed to the next stage. Only people who are shortlisted will go to the interview stage, which is stage 2. So in stage 2 is basically an interview of shortlisted candidates. So this is basically facing via Skype, face-to-face, the interviewers from the admissions committee. It could be a faculty member, it could be a director like myself, it could be an alumni for the interview. After the interview, you will need to be able to go to the third stage. So the third stage basically is more of a final selection process. What we essentially do at Nanyang is we introduce the art or science of selecting people. So your aggregate scores in the assessment and the interview process will be cumulatively added, and then there will be a ranking. In Singapore we like ranking a lot. So comparing the best from the batch, and so the best people, probably the best 10% of the group, will be offered admissions. Of course, in the final selection, ranking is one part of it, but there will also be discussions and arguments. There will be some people who are championing, like you said, certain industries, certain genders, more female, more male. So there will be some deliberation between the ADCOM, who goes in and goes out. And then the final decision is handed out and approved by the MBA Associate Dean. And then we make the offer.
Wow, that is very interesting. So, would you be able to share what lends more weight to that ranking, that point total? Is it more GMAT or more academic grades or work experience? Like,
I think in the selection process, most B schools will be using the same criteria, which is basically, like you said, academic performance, GMAT, career progression, or potential, we call it that way. And then, of course, the referees will also have their say, who you are. It's a third-party assessment. So the key thing about me when I came to Nanyang is not when I first established the selection criteria and the processes and things like that, is every year I tend to change it. The weightage of each criteria changes every year, depending also on market requirements. That's why it's very difficult to compare one batch of intake from the other, because the criteria may be using the criteria we use probably will be the same, but we have a different way of putting weightage every year. You can tweak the formula in such a way that it lends value. For example, for the 12 months program that we'll be doing, right? The criteria we'll be using will be the same, but we will tweak the thing in such a way that we are looking for a certain group of people in the 12 months program, because 12 months is going to be more challenging than a 16 months. The program that we have, there's also an industry project that you need to do within 12 months. Aside from the leadership module that we introduced, there's also this new thing about business study mission becoming a mandatory requirement. Could you imagine within 12 months? So our criteria of people will become different. The leadership potential index will be given some more weight in terms of if you compare that from the previous year. So there's a lot of things that will change in this particular thing. And again, having said that, there is this introduction of between stage 2 and stage 3, there is this introduction of another, I would say, another criteria in the process before you get admitted. You will have to take another sort of assessment, which you yourself will be doing. So we have changed it for this year, especially for this year program, because we're saying we need to be able to get the best people. So the criteria becomes more stringent. We are adding another set of criteria to make it more stringent.
Well, what is that? What is that criteria? I'm sure people are dying to know what that second set of criteria is.
The second set of criteria is more about, I cannot name the exact name that we'll be using, but it is something like it's an additional step wherein if you are going to be admitted to Nanyang, you need to take this particular test wherein you require you to fill up this test, and then we come up with a profile of you, and we share it with the applicant. Because let's face it, each particular MBA aspirant will have a different goal aspiration. So if your application says you want to be a management consultant, and then when you took this assessment, it doesn't say so, right? It contradicts your aspiration. We tell you that this is how you do this, and because the program is 12 months, we will not be able to transform you within 12 months. It will be very challenging. It is doable, but very challenging. So we tell you that this is not going to be, you're not aligned with your aspiration. Of course, sometimes we say we are firm on our aspirations, but tests that are conducted by successful companies, if you are not management consultant caliber, we will tell you.
Yeah.
And of course, if you say no, I still want to be a management consultant, then we will have that kind of discussion in the final decision making whether we would want you, because at the end of the day, we would want you to succeed. And if there's no alignment of these things, we will have an issue with that.
I think that's a very interesting process, because I think a lot of candidates feel like, the MBA is the one thing that's going to really change their career, and surely it can. But especially with a 12-month program, I like that Nanyang is taking that step to really ensure its candidates are more focused, they're ready, they're prepared, they have a sort of clear plan, and they have a good idea of who they are, in terms of what sort of careers they get into. I think that's a really unique step for a business school to take. I mean, in terms of timing, if you apply earlier, do you hear back earlier from Nanyang?
Okay, we have 2 rounds of application. The first one ends at the end of the year, because this one is aligned towards certain scholarship like APEC and ASEAN. So December 31st is the first round, and round 2 ends in the first quarter of the year, which is end of March. So the basic difference between round 1 and round 2, round 1 is batch mode, which means we look at all the applications that we receive, and then from there make a conscious decision who are going to be shortlisted for interview. It's batch, it's not rolling admission.
Okay.
So the entire applicants batch in round 1 will be assessed, and then from there we will rank them accordingly and then shortlist people for interview. Round 2 is also batch, but with a rolling twist. Because what happens between round 1 and round 2 are quite unique. Because when we are doing round 1 admissions, right, we're selecting people, we will be able to make the offers to people. So in a sense, we are building the class based on round 1 admits, right? So I'm saying that is, we know the caliber of round 1. So when you apply in round 2, we more or less know what kind of people we need, because we know the caliber of round 1. For round 2 applicants, you need to be of the same or better caliber than the round 1 applicants, so that we don't, we make the class more homogeneous, same caliber kind of class. So that is something that we're doing. So, but round 2 becomes faster, because we are able to see your caliber the moment you complete your application, and we already are doing the round 1, the admissions process.
So, we
are benchmarking you already. So that's why if you apply in round 2, you will get an earlier interview, for example, if you're the caliber that we're looking. With round 1, it's very tough to get interviews before the end of the year. But like I said, what I'm doing from the moment we open the applications in October to December, I'm already reading applications. So more or less, there will be some instance that I would say people will be called for interview, although the batch has not ended in round 1. It's just because that we see you as something that we would like to be in the program, So, but again, having said that, we had this batch mode for round 1, and batch 2 is more batch to rolling kind of admission basis.
That's very clear. And do any candidates get, say, waitlisted in round 1 and then hear back in round 2?
Okay. There will be a small chance. There will be a few candidates that will be waitlisted. We don't call them waitlisted because we have not spoken to them. We just call them considered.
Okay.
Round 2. We even ask you, we don't feel like interviewing you for this round because of the strength of the other applicants in this round, but we even ask you whether you want to be considered for round 2, So we don't put you as waitlisted. So you have the option whether you want to be considered for round 2. For other purposes, waitlist only applies for people we have interviewed already. So we don't tell them you're waitlisted, you're considered for round 2. So there will be a few of these people that will be from round 1 that will be considered for round 2. The thing about that is those round 1 people who are considered for round 2, they will be compared against the round 2 applicants, which is hopefully they will be stronger candidates. Then they will have a chance to get interviewed.
Okay, no, that's interesting. And do you have any plans to grow the class, or do you think the class will stay roughly the same size?
That's a good question, because when I came in, coming from a person who grows businesses, who was hired to grow businesses, I thought when I came in to Nanyang, we'll be doubling the enrollment, But we have a small group because I think we want to have the best faculty teach at the MBA level. And so far, our faculty constraints we do have one of the probably the biggest faculties in Asia in terms of business school who teach at the business school. But for those people who we think are appropriate for MBAs, we don't have enough professors to handle a size bigger than maybe 80 to 100 people.
Yeah.
Full time. Having said that, we have something like part-time people will be something like 200 people. So we only cater to what our capacity in terms of faculty is when it comes to number of admits.
Great. And does Nanyang have a minimum GMAT score? And if candidates have a low score, what can they do to improve their chances?
I think if we're going to maintain a certain quality that we tell people we have quality candidates, we need to have a benchmark. And the only benchmark available for MBA applicants will be GMAT, right? Because that's the only common test that people will be taken to be able to enter Nanyang. So having said that, we have put up a minimum of 600. We feel that 600 is a good enough benchmark for people to enter Nanyang as a minimum score. Our average is probably from last year, the average GMAT score of people is 672, But having said that, at 600, you have an equal chance of getting into Nanyang compared to somebody with a 760 GMAT. Wow. GMAT is one of these requirements. It's a filter. It's an eligibility filter.
Yep.
So if you meet 600, you can enter Nanyang. If you get 760, you can still enter Nanyang.
Okay, and what 3 things can applicants do to improve their chances of admissions?
Hold on, Darren. I'll address the other question that you mentioned. If candidates have a low score, what can they do to improve their chances? This is something that I had been advocating to many people during course previews that we have done across the world. There's always this question about if I have a low GMAT score, what can I do to improve chances?
Yeah.
That is something that you need to meet a certain criteria, right? So if you don't meet that criteria, there's no other chance that you can do to be able to enter Nanyang, right? In terms of GMAT, because you need to meet the minimum, right?
Yes.
But having said that, if your GMAT is lower than our minimum requirement, that doesn't stop you from applying to Nanyang. But like I said, you are what you are at this point of time. There's no way you can improve yourself, etc. So you apply to Nanyang with a low score. We look at you on a holistic basis. Like I said, there's so many criteria there. And then surprisingly, even with the low GMAT, for example, your point score with GMAT with lower than 600 is 0. But all the other stuff that you bring to the table is something that compared to the other applicants is still good enough to be able to bring you to the program. We will take you in, right? But of course, having said that, we will talk to you and say, you will need to retake GMAT. We need to maintain a certain quality of aspirations, because if you're just missing GMAT by a few percentage points, I think retaking the GMAT is not a waste of money, but just trying to prove that you belong, the sense of the people with a GMAT minimum score of 600, and these people, like I said, some will have higher, but just meet the minimum of 600, you're in. So there's no other way to improve your chances, but you must first meet the minimum criteria to be able to enter Nanyang. I think we cannot sacrifice quality in the sense, of course, like I said, it's just a pre-filter, because like I said, each and every person has a different educational background, and this is the only academically set of tests that how you will perform in class, which is GMAT or GRE, for example. We also accept GRE. Yeah.
Interesting. So if I can sort of summarize that, if someone has a low GMAT that's close to that minimum score, they will have to meet that minimum score. But if they can bring something to the class that's very different, that's very unique, that's very valuable, bring that perspective to the Nanyang MBA, then you would encourage them to apply and meet that minimum requirement.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Great. And so on that note, so that's one thing, but what other things can applicants do to improve their chances of admission?
Okay.
And this is an intentionally broad question, Nick.
Yep. I have a common answer to this one.
Okay.
I think as you apply to an MBA at the point of time, like I said, you are already who you are or what you are. You will not be able to change whatever you have accomplished in the past. So you apply with a common knowledge that this is who you are, this is what you can bring to the table, right? Because at Nanyang, like I said, it's a comparative mode of admission. You're being compared with the rest of the applicants around the world. So when you apply, you're applying with your set of accomplishment, with your GMAT, with your careers, having done so much in this particular time. You have your academics, which you cannot do anything more, right? To improve that. So when you apply at the point of application, you are at the mercy of the other applicants. You don't know their caliber. That's why I said just apply, because you never know the caliber of the people that are applying. Maybe you're better, maybe you're not better than them. So, but you must still apply and see what your chances are in terms of getting selected. But the key thing about this is basically more on when you apply and you're selected for the interview. The interview is one that you need to be able to present yourself well, because that is probably the only instance that you will get to be able to present yourself, and there is a two-way dialogue. When you apply, your application is just paper. You cannot do anything more. You can put in your reference report, etc., your other accomplishments, you put in there, and that's it when you apply. But to be admitted, it is the interviews portion that will be key to your being admitted, because that is when you present yourself. And based on that, since you're already shortlisted, we are looking at people, how people present themselves, how people think about so many aspects of business or even non-business. We even talk to that. So I think the chance of admission is higher if you perform well in the interview. Yeah, but having said that, like I said, we are very much comparative. Your scores in the interview versus the scores in the assessment, you compare that. So those things are beyond your control. So my message is basically this: when you submit your application, like you're trying to submit your best, which means you're similar to what you're applying for jobs. You get so many competitors, submit whatever best that you can do and do it pretty well in terms of applications, right? And then in the interview, it's for you to prepare and perform during the interview, because the interview is very short. It's something like 20-30 minutes. You perform and be able to leave a mark so that the interviewer would be able to remember you from the many interviews that he has done. This one stands out. And that is something that requires preparation, and a lot of preparation at the same time. Like I said, it boils down to who you are at that particular time. Yeah, and so those are the key things that will probably, if you say improving your chance of admission, these are the two key things that you would need to address. At Nanyang, it's basically comparison. Yeah. The key word is comparison. We will deny admission to people who are also good, but it doesn't mean you're not good. It's just that we chose a better person.
Yeah,
I think that one you will hear from me. When you are really, really good and you didn't get an admission offer from Nanyang, it is just because we admitted somebody who is better than you. That's it. You're really, really good. It's just that we admitted somebody who we feel is better than you and who will contribute more to the program rather than what you're offering us.
So the interview is important, but can you give us a few tips on how someone can stand out in an interview, aside from obviously, preparing, making sure they can be articulate and articulately talk about their past experience, but is there any one or two things that really help someone stand out in an interview?
I think it's just like any job interview. It's just being yourself. Okay. An interview, like I said, is a two-way dialogue. It's a two-way communication kind of thing. So when you're being asked questions, the ability to think on your feet, is an important attribute of a person that we're looking for, because questions could be coming from anywhere, and when you don't know the thing, you just need to admit it, right? Because rather than go through the entire thing, going through the loop, and just messing up with us, we will know that because our interviewers are more or less very experienced people. So that is one thing that I would like to emphasize: being yourself and being able to know who you are, what you know, and that's it. And just being yourself, casually talking to a person. Now, if your objective is to impress, that is something different, because there is an additional step that you would, because impressing somebody is more or less sometimes it's personality based, sometimes it's knowledge based as well. There are some people who are really very casually can impress people, that can sell themselves well than other people. I think that is a given. But I think knowledge, like I said, there's some preparation you can do, because MBA is MBA. It's talking about a lot of things. If you're MBA materials, the common expectations is you know a lot of things. That's the problem, right? If you don't know, then just have to admit, I don't know this. Maybe you can ask me another question. So we're fair to that one.
Great. And if we could shift the spotlight over to financing. In terms of course, the focus should be on getting into the program first before scholarships. But could you let us know what percentage of your full-time class gets scholarships and what your typical average amount is?
There are a number of scholarships available to most people, like APEC, ASEAN, ADB, of course, the QS, and other smaller scholarships. So I would say, depending on each intake, if I just mentioned last year, it is something like around 20% are getting scholarships from all these sources of scholarships. At Nanyang, the Nanyang MBA scholarship is very much merit driven. It is based on merit, not on financial need. It is something that I'm also trying to change a bit, putting up a grant, which is basically financial based. So if it's a merit-based scholarship, we at Nanyang believe in a philosophy of co-ownership, meaning we will invest in you by giving you a scholarship. At the same time, you're also investing in yourself. So there is this co-ownership. That's why we don't give full scholarships. Because of this philosophy. So if you ask me, the range could range from anything between 20% to 50% of the tuition fees.
And how can applicants improve their chances of getting one of those scholarships?
The scholarships and the admissions process are intertwined. So your performance in the admissions process determines your chances of scholarships. Like I said, it's very much merit-based. So when we award scholarships, it is different from other people, because some schools will offer an admissions offer with a scholarship. We don't do that at Nanyang, because we believe there are two steps to it. Two steps, meaning the admission process will need to take its own course, and scholarships comes in after that. So what happens after the admissions process is, like I said, there will be a ranking of people, right? So if you're at the top, the heap, you're going to be admitted, yes. And among those admitted people, the scholarships will be distributed according to your so-called ranking in the admissions process. Yeah, it's quite different. Like I said, it's very much merit-based, and most of our scholars have performed pretty well in the class as well as outside the class. So it's very much something like an honor,
Yes.
To be a scholar at Nanyang is an honor, because you can see that in the class, you can see that post your MBA who our scholars are, and they're proven to be high performers, to say the least. So that's why we have a separate thing. We have yet to come to a point that say we offer you and there is a scholarship. We don't, because the philosophy is also this. We want you to accept the offer because you think Nanyang is best for you. And that's why our scholarships are only for admitted students. that is the current philosophy and policy we have at this point of time. So maybe things will change. I don't know. But what I'm saying, at this point of time, scholarships are only offered to our students. So people who have accepted the offers are the ones at the top of the rankings. They will be the ones that we offered scholarships.
Interesting. And would you recommend any loan options for international students?
This is something that is still probably a challenge for Singapore banks to provide loan options to international students, like what the big schools are doing. But there are certain countries or nationals that can, because of the bank being present in Singapore, who are offering their citizens to be able to avail of loans. For example, the Bank of India has come to Singapore, so they're able to get loans here in Singapore at very good interest rates. But other than that, I think it's quite the only loans available for international students are those banks that, like for example, RHB and Maybank, but they require local guarantors, meaning people who are residing, working in Singapore, being their guarantors for their loans.
And those guarantors, I mean, at least when I was at SMU, they had to be related. Am I not mistaken? Do they have to be related to the student?
No.
Okay,
they
no. So
vouch for the person, the student himself, because they are in Singapore. I mean, but contractual obligations of guarantor is to, if the student forfeits, he would pay. So no need for any kind of relationship with the student.
Okay.
Must be a friend, of course, a colleague or something like that.
Yeah. Okay, great. And if we could shift our focus to career services, because every MBA is often most concerned about, can I get a job after I go to this MBA program? So what is Nanyang MBA's reputation with employers in Singapore and abroad?
I think it's quite significantly well recognized because our alumni are working in Singapore, in other places, in China, in Europe, Germany, in UK, in the US. So I think reputation of Nanyang as a really solid program, and the caliber of the MBA alumni that we produce is, like I said, is well recognized around the world. So it's quite significant. But I think it will improve further with the new curriculum, because now we are offering them something that they need, more or less need than compared in the past. We're offering them people who will be able to run from day one and lead people. I think this is something that we are saying our people will be different from the rest of the MBA alumni, because they have undergone something that a lot of other MBA students have not undergone, which is the leadership module that we're trying to advocate.
And do most full-time students stay in Singapore to work? Like what percentage of students stay in Singapore roughly?
It's difficult to say that because each batch is unique. There are people who would like to stay in Singapore to work, and there are people who wanted to go to Nanyang and work elsewhere. So I think it's difficult to say how many. I mean, comparing batch to batch, it will be quite difficult. And at Nanyang, there's also these people who are sponsored employees, so they will tend to go back to their respective countries, not necessarily in Singapore, but also to other countries. So to answer that question is a little bit tricky, because like I said, statistics is one thing to look into, but I think the message I would like to leave people is they should be looking more on their own aspirations, not look at what other people have gone or did in the past, because these are things that are in the past, and the market environments change. So if you're going to study at Nanyang, you must be clear where you want to work, and having options, work in Singapore, work elsewhere, things like that is very important in terms of trying to get your career. At the end of the day, it's your career. It's not about what other people did, because at the end of the day, you are very much different from these people. I mean, you may have the same Nanyang MBA experience or so, but the profile of your profile against their profile are quite different. So to answer that in probably shorter way, how many full-time students stay in Singapore to work? it depends for each batch. A lot of people would want to work in Singapore. If they find jobs in Singapore and they find it worth their time, they will stay. A lot of people do decide not to work in Singapore and go back to their respective regions, and they would want to work there and bring their Nanyang MBA knowledge and experience there and be able to work in that particular target country or region.
Okay, yeah, because I think the